Hi everybody, it's Keren here from tuppencecoloured.co.uk and thank you very much for joining me today. This is the card that I've been making today. I've taken some of the supplies from the autumn winter catalogue and instead of making a seasonal card I've actually made a birthday card. Now I think this has got quite a masculine flavour and I did make it with my son's birthday in mind. His birthday is in the middle of November when I was making this card, I had a couple of incidents. Now, usually I would edit those out, but I thought this time it might be a good idea to leave them in so that you can see how to go about correcting those kind of mistakes if you make them. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay with me and I'll show you how it went. These are the things that I'm using today. My card base is 11.5 by 4, scored and folded at 5 3/4, and the front of that is going to be covered completely, so it doesn't matter what colour card you use. I have a piece of Island Indigo, which is 4 inches by 5 3/4, and I've got a piece of copper foil card, which I'm trying not to flare at you, and I have cut that to 3 3/4 by 5 1/2. I have a piece of the Year of Cheer Specialty Designer Series paper, which I'm saying very, very carefully, and I've chosen this pattern, which has got like the copper and silver sprigs on it, and I've cut that to, let me just check my notes, 3 5/8 by 5 3/8, so that it just fits inside my piece of copper foil there. Okay, and again it's flaring all over the place. I am so sorry about that. I've got some scraps of copper foil and Island Indigo, and I've also got a piece of our permanent adhesive sheet. Okay, it's just a scrap. It's about, what's that, just over an inch, 1 1/4, something like that. Piece of vellum, again, exact size doesn't matter, but it does need to be, I would say, at least 1 inch wide. One of our foil snowflakes. Now they come in silver and gold. I've got one of the silver ones. I'm going to stamp using a stamp from Sunshine Sayings. I really love this set, particularly for gender neutral cards. It's got a nice clean sort of font to it, which I like very much actually. Okay, so I've talked about stamping, and I'm going to be using Versamark ink, copper embossing powder, and also Island Indigo. First thing I want to do is to colour my Year of Cheer background paper, and I've got my Island Indigo ink and my Stampin' sponge, and I'm wearing gloves, not because there's anything that would hurt my hands in the ink, because there isn't, but because if I get this stuff on my fingers it's quite difficult to get off. And similarly I have protected my work surface with a bit of well-used grid paper, as you can see, and I'm just going to start and apply some colour to my Year of Cheer paper, and I am hoping that iMovie can work its magic and kind of take the wobble out of this scene. Now, as you can see, this paper takes colour really, really well, and that is because it's based on our Whisper White, on Stampin' Up Whisper White, which is about one of the best white papers, stroke cards, that I've ever come across. I think it's really lovely surface for stamping on, and it's a really lovely surface for taking colour. It doesn't take watercolour that well because it's not quite robust enough. Okay, but generally speaking, for inking, it's, in my humble opinion, without equal. Okay, so I'm got a soft cloth, and I'm just going to go over the top of that just to take off any excess ink. And now that just needs a little bit of time for the ink to dry, so while it's doing that we will move on to the next step. Next I'm going to stamp and emboss my greeting. I've got my happy birthday on my clear block, and I'm just going to ink it up with some Versamark. Okay, and I want to position this quite near to the bottom of my piece of vellum, and I'm pressing down and counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have got a silicone mat underneath, which isn't strictly speaking necessary with this stamp because it does have a cushion, but vellum can be tricky to stamp on, okay, because it's a not particularly absorbent surface. Ink doesn't dry well on it, so generally speaking, if you're trying to stamp onto vellum, you're better off to heat emboss it or use a fast drying ink or a solvent ink. Okay, so I've got my copper embossing powder. Do I need my tidy tray? I don't think I do. I think I'm going to be brave. Oh, I should have mentioned that I did, off camera, I did go over my vellum very well with my embossing buddy. Okay, okay, how's that looking? And that's stamped and taken the powder nicely. Got my heat gun, and I'm going to turn it on to the high setting and give it a few minutes to warm up, and then I'm going to heat emboss this. I'll turn the sound down while I do it. A couple of things I want to say about embossing on vellum. The first one is to let your heat gun get really, really hot before you start to bring it to the embossing powder. That way you kind of minimise the length of time that you have to hold the heat gun over the vellum. All right, and that also applies if you're embossing onto heat resistant acetate. And the other thing is that I did heat from the back. I usually heat from the back if I can, and again that helps to stop the little bits of embossing powder being blown off by the heat gun, and it gives you a lovely smooth finish on your embossing. This is a sizable piece of the copper foil card, paper, whatever you want to call it, and most of it is going to be covered up by the background. I only want a very narrow little piece of border showing, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to gut it. I'll turn it over so that the copper isn't flaring in your eyes, and I'm just going to put it into my trimmer, and I think I'll put it up at the 3/4 of an inch mark. That will leave me plenty, and I'm going to start at about 1.5 centimeters, and I'm going to stop at the 8 centimeter mark. Okay, now if you're using an imperial trimmer, I should have gone a little bit far on that, but it doesn't matter. If you're using an imperial trimmer, you know, you can stop at the 3/4 of an inch mark and wherever that takes you. And I'm just going to work my way around. And I'm just chopping out the inside of my card. Now if I was planning to do any die cutting, I could have just die cut out of the centre of my piece of copper foil, and now I've got that piece to use on something else, to maybe die cut some shapes out of, or as a little bit of an accent, but I like to feel that I haven't wasted it. I've trimmed my piece of vellum, so it's 3 3/4 of an inch wide, and I've got my sticks to 3, 2, 1. It's not sticks to at all. Here's my piece of vellum, which I've cut to 3 3/4 of an inch wide, and I've got my double-sided permanent adhesive sheet on the back of it, and I'm going to cut this. I'm going to make this about 3/8 of an inch wide. Okay, just checking that that looks about right, and it does. And I'm going to start my blade in the middle of my adhesive sheet and go forwards and backwards. And I'm going to go a couple of times because I'm going through a couple of layers. And that is not straight at all. Okay. Alright, well, I'll just correct this then. So now I'm going to put it all together. I've gone ahead and I've put the Island Indigo onto my my card base, just to save a little bit of time. So first of all, I'm going to put the foil onto my background, or my background onto my foil, whichever way you care to look at it. Now I'm going to be very, very careful with this because it's a very narrow margin of copper that I want showing, and I have used fast fuse, so that is going to stick pretty quickly. Okay, so now I've got my silver snowflake, and I'm trying to decide whereabouts on my card I want it. And my happy birthday is going to sit over there, so I think I want it on this side up towards the top. So again with the fast fuse, and just going to pop that into place. And my snips, here they are. I'm just going to snip away the bit I don't want, and I'm working from the back so I can see where I'm cutting. Okay. And now I'm going to bring in my layers. Now I've cut this to 1 inch by 3 3/4, and that's cut from the bit of copper that I chopped out of the middle of the card. So you know, waste not, want not. And I'm going to pop that around about there, and then this one is going to go, whoops. Tried to flick off my fast fuse, and I flicked off my card. That doesn't sound right. Don't know whether you can hear, but next door's dog is up and talking for the day. And now I'm just going to carefully pull my double-sided adhesive sheet back up away, and this then sits in the middle. And because it's an all-over adhesive, once that is burnished into place, it's not really visible. Okay, and yeah, this is because of the copper foil being so foily and the lights, this is flaring like a mad thing, so I do apologise. Come on, fast fuse, behave yourself. There we go. I think actually I'm coming to the end of my fast fuse, and I may need to refill it soon. There we go, and flick. And now this is going to go onto my card base, and there it is. Okay, so here is my finished card, and it met with a bit of an incident. So I'm going to tell you what I did wrong so that you don't have to repeat my mistakes. So what happened I decided that I was going to take my bone folder and I was going to really burnish my piece of vellum down well onto my underlying card. And when I did that, I got a bit too near to my stamped and embossed greeting. Now, you remember me saying that ink does not dry well on vellum. Well, the lightest touch will flick it off. Okay, so that is what happened to my message. So it's now looking a bit antique, which I didn't really want it to. We will try and correct it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of my lighter fluid, and I'm going to take that, put that onto the top there, and it will melt the adhesive so that I can pull it off. Okay, and I can re-stamp this onto another piece of vellum and then replace it onto my card here. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I will redo the front of the card for my my intro and for the picture that I take at the end, so that hopefully this will be looking all lovely. But meanwhile, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've learned from my mistakes, and I hope you come back and join me again soon. But for now, thank you very much for joining me, and bye bye.